What I love about this technique in the video is that the girl actually has these shorter bangs, and by bringing this point of this farther up, you can incorporate some of that color moving forward. On these two mannequins, I kind of made a little bit of a shift, right? Because this mannequin doesn't have bangs. So I actually took part of a technique from another one called Soleil. I took the fringe area for Soleil, and then I just moved this diamond back on her hair so that I could get a little bit of color in the front. That's the only difference. On this mannequin, guess what? She already has color in the front. It's really the top that I want to focus on. So this is purely the cool sands technique that we're going to do. What I did was I parted the hair down the middle. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin on the left side. I'm going to bring her down just a little bit. Perfect. I'm going to start on this left side here. And I went ahead and separated it into two. You could do it in one if you wanted to, but what we're really looking to do is start with our diagonal back right along the front. I'm going to take my first little piece here. Now the goal here is to create bunch work of packets. All of our foil work is going diagonal back, right? But the idea is to create a little bit more organicness. So we're going to be using a little bit of weaving, a little bit of chunky weaving, and also a little bit of teasy highlighting. I'm working with two different lighteners here. The first one I'm going to be working with is our Blonde Voyage cream lightener, which I absolutely love. And then we're also going to work with the powdered lightener just so that you can see the difference. In the actual technique, they use the clay. So this is a very universal technique that can be used with any of our different lighteners. But let's start with cream. So let me jump back. Here we go. So this is an amazing new product. This is something that we just launched in March, April. When we were working with our Blonde Voyage portfolio before, we had our cream and our clay and our powder. And so we needed like another little tool. So I was really excited when I saw the cream lightener come out for a couple different reasons. The first one right off the bat was, I think about what I'm doing a lot behind the chair. What's really popular that we've been doing for a couple of years now around the face? Money pieces, right? And what do we know about money pieces and how they treat that front hairline? Lots of heat, lots of extra styling, lots of tugging, lots of, putting the lightener in the same section. I'm gonna go in and do a little bit more of a slice in my section, just to create a little bit more dimension. I'll switch clips too. So just a slice here. I've got one little blonde piece I'm gonna pull out of there. So the other thing I really like about this pool sands technique is it's really meant to kind of help blend everything together. I think sometimes when we get people that come in, especially if they're every 3 to 4 months, which a lot of our guests are starting to do these days, right? A lot of times we have a lot of depth at the top and then we have a lot of hair that's grown out and blonder on the end. So what I like about this pool sands technique is it really gives me the ability to go in and blend everything together. What I like about the diagonal back placement is as it crosses over the apex of the head and starts heading back to the back, it goes from being diagonal forward to being diagonal back, right? Or excuse me, from being diagonal back to being diagonal forward. Thank you. And I think that's really important. And one of the things I talk to about my kids when I'm working with my stylist is, you know, everybody likes to see color on the face. Would you agree? And a lot of times we're doing like diagonal back because we're mimicking the shape of the haircut. The hair's been pulled forward and cut short. Everything's moving towards the back. So why not emphasize that movement? But the problem is if you're trying to see a lot of color moving towards your face, if everything's diagonal back, and where is it headed? Away from the face, right? So I like this technique because like I said, if you cross over, you're going from diagonal back. And then as this comes forward, now you've got color that's actually moving towards the front. So you get a nice blending of that movement around the face. So that's what I really like about pool sands. So the other reason why I like to use herringbone technique a lot. Don't know what that is? The herringbone towards the front of the face. With some colors moving forward and some colors moving away. That's a great way to do it. So now I've got a little bit of space, right? I've put in my 3 packets. I'm actually going to jump back by about 1 inch. This is really key if you're trying to leave that dimensional feel in there. And now I'm going to go ahead and work with my Blonde Voyage powder lightener and my TV highlight application, right? So I'm going to create a little bit more lived in as I'm working through the top. With Blonde Voyage, you guys, you can't go wrong with this lightener. What I love about our lighteners too is that all of them have bond care in them. So bond care is our bond building system that we put into our lightener. The nice thing that I found about it is that the majority of the time I never use more than 15 volume. That's what I have in here. You'll notice we have the 15 volume, which I think is pretty cool. But I use 15 volume all the time with lighting. What I find is it doesn't really matter what level they're at. 15 and lower is going to get me there. Level 2, level 4, level 6, level 8. 15 and down, I'm there, right? I use 20%, maybe 20 of the time. The beauty of Blonde Voyage powder lightener is they can give you up to 9 levels of lift. And what I love about the consistency of that lift, it's fast, so it's efficient. It also comes out with a beautiful quality of undertone. It's very pale. And there's great integrity to the hair after you're done. So for me, it kind of hits on all 3 things, where a lot of lighteners, I find like it'll do 2 of those things. So I'm like, I found lighteners that I liked, but nothing like Blonde Voyage, which I love. So I'm going to go ahead and start working right in this section here. And I'm just going to take a slice. Absolutely. And I would even suggest, I mean, the other day I was doing a class and we did a class with a model that was level 4. Half of her hair was natural, the other half was regular. We actually used a watered down version of clay lightning with like 4 parts developer, which is way watered down. Put it on the hair for 20 minutes. She lifted 7 levels. Like, and the quality of the undertone, there wasn't a lot of reddish to it, it was still kind of neutral looking. So again, it's a very powerful lighting. You might even feel like 5 and 10 is a great way to go. Definitely. Big question. So I'm going to spray just a little bit of this magic powder. Do y'all know this product? Dry texture spray. Is anybody a fan? One of my favorite, yes, it's an amazing product. So one of my favorite things to do TV highlights because it gives me a lot of control. You know, most of my guests that come in, I have them come in pre-treated. I'm doing on scalp, maybe not. But I like for that hair to be clean and conditioned. So sometimes the hair is a little slippery, right? I'm going to take about a 25% back here to 50. So starting right out the middle. And I'm just pushing that back using my comb, lifting up and then pushing down. It gives me that nice little platform to work off of. And then I'm going to come in. So when doing TZ highlights, I think it's really, really important to consider how much diffusion you're trying to create. But more importantly than that, I think saturation is really the big key. When I, as an educator for professionals, when I see people in the field, 9 times out of 10, their application saturation is not enough, right? And so what's happening is the lightener's not performing in the correct way. They're not getting enough lift. They're creating a lot of like warmth close to the start of their application technique. So I wanted to share with you, when I do my TZ highlights, the first thing I really like to do is build up all of the lightener that I think I'm going to need into this section. What that does is it creates a pillow. And I want you to think about food for a second, which I love to use these analogies, right? So has anybody frosted brownies or a cake before? Right. When you get that icing on there, you plop it in the middle and then you use a big spatula to move it around, right? And it's important that when you move that spatula, you're not at too much of an angle. But I see a lot of people that blend like this, and that's fine unless you don't have enough saturation here. Because then you start to move the saturation away from this area. And so what you get is not enough product here and not enough product, right? So by building this pillow of lightener up, then what I'm able to do is come back and just like I would with a cake, take my brush, tilt it on a little bit of an angle, and then with no pressure at all, I'm able to move that product up without affecting the saturation below it. Do y'all see that? So important. Because what I typically see is people using this like a paintbrush, right? It's not a paintbrush. It's a spatula. So we should never be applying color like this because you get like a knocking motion and I start pushing. Well, think about if I've got foil stacked up and I'm pushing, that's going to affect a lot of things underneath it. By just flipping the brush over and working with it on my side, to push, I literally have to use my whole body to push down. It's a very unnatural motion. Plus, it allows the spreadability of that product. So I'll do another one here. Oh, hi, there you are. So now I'm going to take another one. This one I'm going to slice. I'm going to tease. And then I'm going to come through and weave my slice after I've teased. You can do it before or after. I think for me, the most important thing, if you're trying to create a technique like this, where you're trying to get it almost to look like kids' hair when this from the sun, right? It has like an organic placement. So when I pick up the hair, I'm looking at the actual section of hair and deciding what I want to see from that section. Like in this section, I see there's some blonde already in there. So I'm going to go in and do a little bit of a tease. I'm going to start a little bit farther down. So I create a little bit more diffusion on the top of the head. And then again, with my brush pointed towards the back, I'm going to lift up and then come down. Have you all ever seen that before with the locking mechanism? So helpful. It takes a minute to get it down, but once you get there, you should be good to go. Oh, that's what I was going to do. So let me just weave just a little bit of this out. So see, I have more blonde here and not as much blonde here. So I'm really just going to pick up the stuff that's sitting over here that's less blonde, because there's really no need for me to color it. It's already blonde. That's the other thing that I like about this technique is it gives you the opportunity to use your eye and decide what's the most appropriate application for that slice or that weave that you're taking. So again, building that pillow of lightener up. Then using my brush, you can see how quickly that spreads down. I don't really have to do a lot of extra saturation. Versus this, y'all see? Y'all see how much product I just pulled off the hair just by going overhand? So tilt it on the side, underhand, feather it through. And then again, here it is. I just pick this up and without any bit of pressure, I'm able to fit towards the top of the scalp or towards the top of the foil without losing that saturation. Just get ahead and fold it up. On these, sometimes I just like to fold them this way. That way they don't get too mushy. All right, so we've done 2 back to back there. Now we're going to move back a little bit farther. So the cool thing about Blanc Voyage powdered lightener is we have the ability as well to change the mixing ratio. So we have a flexible mixing ratio based off of what it is that you're trying to do. A lot of times when I'm working with foil, I want a little bit more tackiness, so I prefer closer to 1 to 1.5. If I'm doing something on scalp, a lot of times I'll go a little bit thinner on the consistency. So we can go all the way to 1 to 2. So if I'm working on scalp, that's usually my preference. I'm taking this all the way up like a traditional weave. And again, just making sure I have good saturation there, using the breath on the side. So Blonde Voyage, the other thing I love about it, and for me, this is what's really important. As a blonding specialist, it's giving me the freedom to do a lot of things that I typically would do in maybe, let's say, 2 or sometimes 3 appointments. Because I like to think about the hair like a bank account, right? Now I'm going to tell this little story because I think it's a great analogy to help speak to what it is that we think about when we work on blonde hair. When we're on blonde hair, our blonde guests are never happy where they are, right? Because the next time they come in, they want to do something different. They want to go lighter, darker, cooler, warmer. So what's really important for me as a blonding specialist is to always have the ability to come back onto that blonde canvas with more energy down the road, right? And a lot of times when we're working with lighteners where we have to use a high volume of developer, we kind of pigeonhole ourselves, right? Because if that blonde hair, if we've used a high volume of developer on that blonde hair, a lot of times there's not much room for us to go back and lift it more. That's why I love the name of our product, Blonde Voyage, right? Because blonding is a journey, it's not a destination. So with our bond care and the ability to use low volumes, I can do things that I've never done before. So how many of y'all have been to like a really fancy steak dinner? Raise your hand. Real fancy steak dinner, right? And if we're going to a fancy steak dinner, we're not going for breadsticks and salad, are we? No, we're going for cocktails. We're going for the whole 9 yards, right? So I want you to imagine that your bank account only has, let's say, $100 in it, okay? Now this, I know, calm down. Payday hasn't hit yet. It's coming. But let's just say for now, you've got $100 in your bank account. You go to the restaurant, you start ordering your drinks, you get your appetizer, you order your main course, your soup comes, right? Your salad comes. And now it's time for dinner, or time for dessert. Everybody's favorite part, right? So when we get ready for dessert, we look at our bank account, we only have $5 left in our bank account. And dessert is $15. So here's my question. Can I order dessert? Yes, you can. The bank's just going to charge you $33 for that dessert. So that's what I like to think about. The hair is like a fixed bank account, okay? It's a fixed bank account. And every time that you unleash energy on that hair, you're taking a deduction from that bank account. This is what I love about it. If you use, let's say 20, 30, or 40 volume, you better hope to goodness that you get where you want to be with that amount of energy. Because if you don't get there, guess what? Now I spent all this money in that bank account and I just have a little bit left. So there's not enough room to unleash more energy on it later. Do y'all know the difference between 10 and 20 volume and its energy output? Can anybody tell me? Somebody said a lot. Okay, let's talk about it, right? So volume, right? What is volume? When we say volume, what are we talking about? So, okay, so I heard someone say something about percentage, right? So that's also on the bottle. It'll say like 10 volume and then it'll be like 3% peroxide or 6% peroxide. So the percent peroxide is actually what y'all are talking about. That's the amount of hydrogen peroxide suspended in solution of water and other chemicals. The volume is a measurement, is it not? Yeah, volume is a measurement. What is it a measure of? Could be levels of lift, sure. How about energy? It's the space or the energy that it gives off. That's what I want you to think about volume. The more higher up in volume, the more energy it's going to release. Doesn't necessarily guarantee more lift. It just tells you that you're releasing more energy on the hair, right? So let's talk about that energy in form of like units of measurement, because they're actually, you can measure the energy that comes out. But we'll be arbitrary today just because we're trying to be easy on math. So let's just say 10 volume gives off 10 units of energy. Right? 10 volume gives off 10 units of energy. How many units of energy do you think 20 volume gives off? Higher, 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 100, 100. What does that call, my scientific friends? Called a logarithmic increase. It's just like the pH scale, right? It's a logarithmic. So you're unleashing 10 times the amount of energy just by going up 10 volume. 10 times the amount of energy. So if 20 volume gives off 100 units of energy, how much does 30 volume give off? 1,000. How much does 40 give off? 10,000. 10,000. That's okay. That's why we did easy zeros today, right? But do you all see how important that is? Now, why is it that when you use like a 30 or 40 volume, you open it up in the first 10 minutes, you're like, woo, look at it go. And then you open it up again, you open it up again, and it's not moving. So the one thing that I find a lot of times, and maybe y'all can help me out with this, what I find a lot of times is that students learn that levels of lift is directly tied to the amount of the volume of developer that you're using, and nothing could be farther from the truth. Because you just heard me tell you, I gave you a watered down version of Lightner was able to lift almost 7 levels on somebody that had previous color. So what it really comes down to is allowing the product enough time to process. What happens when you use 30 volume is it unleashes all of its energy in the beginning of that oxidation period, and then it stops. So again, go back to the idea of a bank account, right? Now I've made this huge deduction and I'm not where I want to be, right? What's really funny to me that I find really funny as an educator in the field is that stylists are not afraid to use Lightner with 30 and 40 volume, but they're horrified to use permanent color with 30 and 40 volume. Isn't that so strange? It's very strange to me, but I see it all the time. And it's because with permanent hair color, what provides the lift? The what? The developer, right? The developer is what's driving the lift. I mean, there's ammonia in the tube and it's helping out, right? But the developer is what's really driving the lift. And if we don't get enough lift with the developer, well, we don't get to the correct underlying pigment. Then we don't have the right saturation of dye in the tube. We don't have the right calibration of dyes to counteract what we're trying to do. And so you end up with a situation where you have like a dark wall that you're trying to paint over. You paint over without priming because you're being a little lazy, right? It's all done. And then you're like, oh crap, I got to paint this like 3 more times. That's the idea, right? That undertone is still going to come through. So in color, I think it's super important that we teach that they use enough energy to lift. With Lightner, I don't really feel like that's the situation. Does that make sense? I think that's one of the biggest challenges I find. And what's so amazing, again, about MoroccanOil Lightner, it's just a fantastic product. It lifts beautifully. So I think that's the other thing is actually getting stylists to like retract from using so much high volume, letting it process for an additional 5 to 10 minutes, right? Because in that situation, I'm able to get a little bit more lift than what I would have if I'd used 20 or 30 or 40. And what I find is because I'm lifting in a slow manner, the quality of that undertone, this stuff right here, right? The quality of this is much softer, right? And if it's softer, what does that mean? We don't have to correct it. Or if we are correcting it, we're not really correcting it. We're just adding a shimmer, a reflection of a tone, right? For instance, a lot of times when we use those heavy volume developers, when we get a lot of rawness out of that lift, and then what do we have to do? We have to really go in and correct it, which to me, for most stylists, is a little bit more scary, right? It's easy for them to like put a soft tone in, but to go in and actually correct is a little bit more difficult. So I think that's super, super important to make sure that we're thinking about this idea of utilizing lower volumes and letting it process. Now, of course, you know me, I work with professionals. And you know how those professionals are. They know everything. And they're like, Todd, I don't have time for this, right? But think about how long it takes you to mix up, formulate, mix up, apply, process, rinse, and condition a corrected toner. How long, like just on a time frame, how long does that take? I can't hear me. 30 minutes, at the bare minimum, 30 minutes. Because if I'm doing correction, if I'm using a demi-permanent that has a 20-minute processing time, you want the longevity of that correction, so you need full processing time, without a doubt, right? So there's 20 minutes, then it depends on how fast you apply, right? So you see where I'm going with this. I'm gonna just drop my developer, let it process for an extra 10 minutes, and now maybe I'm just visually toning in 7 to 15 minutes versus doing a full-on color corrective toner, which by the way, puts the guest on that color correction merry-go-round, right? That's what I call it. The tone's ugly, you correct it, it fades out, they come back in, we're doing this, right? Where chances are, if we could just do a little bit more lightning, we don't have to be in that correction situation. Because that's what I find, right? It's not that they're not knowing how to correct the tone, it's more that they're trying to tone out to a lighter level, right? That's what our students do a lot too, right? They'll live to an 8, they're like, okay, what toner do I make this for platinum? And you're like, honey, dream on. You're not at a 10, you're on an 8 still. So I think those are really, really important things when you're speaking to color correction, when you're speaking to lighting. And think about it, for me, what I love about this product here, whoops, where'd you go? This product here, the clay, this is where if I'm 5 to 10 minutes from rinsing, I'll mix up that clay, I'll pull out my foils, and now guess what? I have a little bit of a goose. I can pop up any hair that needs to go a little bit lighter, and I don't have to wait for it to open the cuticle. It's already open. So now I'm decolorizing. In 5 to 10 minutes, I'm at half level to full level of lip. Also, a lot of times my guests come in and they have all this previous blonde. I can't necessarily overlap in that situation, right? So I love being able to pull those foils out, swipe that clay lightener on top of that previously blonde foil. What is that going to do? It erases all of that previous toner. It reestablishes the dimension from scalp to ends, right? So I'm really able to get in there and control, and it helps for the tone to deposit more evenly if you've got even lift from scalp to ends or even pH, right? So for me, all of those things are a benefit. And with it being a clay lightener, as I'm pulling those packets out, guess what? I can just drop it. I don't have to worry about wiping it and putting a foil underneath it, right? So it just encapsulates itself. And again, I'm using 20 volume or 15 volume on it, but it's only going to be on there for 5 to 10 minutes. So that's the trade-off for me. I can go with higher energy, it's just less time. It's a trade-off on that energy release and that exchange, right? That bank account. Does that make sense? Correct. I think that would help clear the confusion, because when I tell you about 50 to 75% of my students really struggle, and professionals struggle with this idea of understanding how developer guarantees you lift. And the only place it really guarantees you a number of level of lifts is with permanent color. Great question. So anyways, did that make sense about blonding? Cool. All right. So the next thing I want to touch on is consultation, right? So this is one of those things that I think as a professional, just like any professional, we come to work every day, we do the same things over and over. A lot of times we end up sort of like skipping on the things we should be doing, and then we make our lives harder for ourselves. Or we miss out on the opportunity for more money, right? If I'm already got my bowl of color mixed up when Sally Mae comes in, and I'm starting applying, well, maybe she wanted highlights that day. Well, there, I just lost out on $100, right? So I think consultation is something that gets left over or looked over really frequently. So I'm just going to give you a couple pieces of download that I like to teach when I speak to consultation. The first one is to make sure you create an atmosphere. I'm really not a fan of this situation where you have the guest like this and you're behind them in the chair, because I'm either doing like this or I'm looking down at you. Plus, this is my workspace. Once somebody sits in this, I need to be operating, not talking. So I would much prefer to take my guests to the front of the salon, hopefully where there's a little bit more natural lights, and be able to sit face to face with them so I can look them in the eye, right? Because communication just isn't verbal. Sometimes it's with your eyes. And isn't it amazing when you're talking to somebody how much more you pick up from what they're saying when you look them in the face? So I love like sitting on the couch, having that side-by-side conversation. It also, again, if you're up by the window, allows me the opportunity to analyze your hair as I'm looking at it. So that's what we talk about when we say atmosphere, right? I like to create something that's more comfortable, right? I don't like to be in this situation because it feels a little domineering, right? This is a little domineering for me. So that's number one. Number two is hair analysis. We'll come back to that in a second. Number three is advice, right? And by the way, these are our 4 A's if you didn't tell, right? So advice is big, right? This is something that I think we all have to take into account because we want to service our guests, we want to make them happy. And then there are limitations that are built in based on our hair analysis, or their desires, or our product limitations. And a lot of times we're like, well, we're just gonna try and see if this works and hope for the best, right? We've all probably been in that situation. It's horrifying. So making sure we're honest and realistic about what those options are, not only especially for that day, but what does those hair appointments look like in the next 180 days? Because as a colorist, it's important for me to have the opportunity to look at my tools and base my tool selection on not only what I'm doing that day, but if I'm gonna have to do something like a lot of blonding or a lot of lifting down the road, I may change my choice of deposit, right? I might use a demi-permanent over a permanent. Does that make sense? Because I'm thinking about what's coming. It's also good to get the guest thinking about that. Because a lot of times the guest is really only thinking about what's happening that day. And to me, I'm like, I don't want to make my life harder. I don't want to root shade with a permanent, right? One of my favorite lines. The only place I like to see a band is at a concert, right? I don't really want one in the hair. Sorry. But it's true. Right? So I think that advice is important. And I think also the opportunity to have the conversation about appointment, right? Because a lot of times these guests don't really realize what it encompasses to be an all over blonde on the global on the scalp, right? What that commitment is. For me, if you're not coming in every 4 to 5 weeks, I'm doubling your price. We're like, what? Like, yes, it's 2 applications. I'm having to fly away from the root first and then go back to the root and sweat the whole time while that lightener's sitting next to your previous blonde, right? So for me, it's a double application, it's a double charge, right? Does that make sense? So again, letting them know what that's gonna be. I've got something that can make you look fabulous, girl, that's not on the scalp, that can look just as beautiful and brilliant and bright. It's just not gonna be all over, right? By the way, that's gonna fit your budget as well. So this rolls into budget, right? When it comes down to appointments. So with that, one of the things that I think stylists have the hardest time with, and correct me if I'm wrong, is understanding the relationship of tone to guest skin. I think it's one of the things that people tend to really have a hard time with. Not only just stylists, right? But I also find that guests have a hard time because they'll bring me in a picture, a beautiful picture, right? Hair is gorgeous, right? And you know what I say? Honey, that hair is gorgeous. It's not for you, right? Because what happens? I put it on her skin. I wash out all the color out of her face and she looks like a corpse walking around, right? And she's like, I don't really like this, right? So I think sometimes it's hard not only for guests to visualize what things look on their skin, it's also difficult for the stylist to understand what tone is going to complement them best. So the first thing I like to do is, what colors do you not wear? We all have colors we don't wear, correct? Guess what mine is? Can you guess what mine is? Red. Red. I don't like wearing red at all. Can you tell why? Because I got a lot of peachy cherryness in my skin tone, right? So I love the white beard. I'm like, kind of cools me off, right? If I have any yellow in my, or any orange in my blonde, oh, honey, we got problems, right? We got problems. So that's important. I think that's a great insight because guests sometimes know if I put on that really bright red dress, I don't look so good, right? Light is a reflection. Your hair is like these stage lights. Now, right now, there's only like 2 of them on, but these stage lights provide color to the skin. Your hair around your face is like a grouping of stage lights. The light reflects back on you. It bounces off the hair and reflects back on the skin, right? So it's really, really important to help the guests visualize this. So something that I did, which I thought was really cool. I went to Wally World, you know, love Walmart, right? And I bought one of these. This is just a textured cardstock. This is to use as like background or matting for a frame. You could also paint on them. But what I love about this is all of the different colors. And I love that it opens up, right? Because what I like to do with this is take my guests, right, over to the mirror. Take them by a light source, somewhere where it's going to reflect, and I'll put it underneath. Now you can see how lovely red looks like, right? So this is a really great experience to take the stylist through, because let's go through this book and put it underneath your chin and let the light reflect back. Let's find a couple colors that you like, and maybe the one or two that maybe we should stay away from. So literally, you can go through this whole book. There's white on this end to give you the most light reflection. This, right? And then there's black to take away the most reflection. So you have a base to start with, and then you just go flipping through all these different colors. Pretty cool, huh? Pink is actually not, isn't that crazy how pink is not as bad for me? But red is like, oh, girl. Oh, man. There's orange. Yellow. It's funny to watch your faces, by the way.
It changes your hair on top.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. That's a great example too of understanding how tone reflects through blonde hair. A lot of times it's not the level 9, 10 that's brassy, is it? It's the level 6, 7 that's living inside of that level 9, 10, that as the light bounces off of it, it's reflecting through all that blonde hair. And that's why you get that. Here's the green. Green's a great color for me. And so are the blues. Blues are great for me, right? This is a really, really great way, I think, to help your students understand, and anybody really for that matter, understand skin tone and how tonal values play off the skin. Sorry, a little feedback there. But how tonal values play off the skin. So I thought this was a really cool exercise. So this is a primary pizzazz. There's 30 sheets and it's called Color Book, BOK. Yeah, and by the way, this is like $6, right? I love a cheap art supply. Go to Michael's someday and try and get through that. Okay, so let's jump back into analysis, and we're going to finish up here because I think this is also really important. You know, another thing that I find that's really challenging in the field with a lot of my stylists is they really have this one-size-fits-all approach to grade coverage. Okay, and I'll be honest with you. A lot of times I will ask, where did you learn that? Sometimes it came from a stylist. A lot of times it came from school. And what they said in school was, it's because my beauty school instructor told me that's the way you have to do it, right? Now, that is not y'all's fault, because the truth of the matter is grade coverage did used to be kind of one size fits all. Would you agree? But I want you to think about the different ways that we can approach dealing with grade. You see my ADHD-ness, I can just make a mess of it out of anything. What are some other ways that we can approach grade? Or deal with grade? What are some other things we can do besides just blending? We can blend it. What else can we do? Tone it, lighten it, right? We can put pepper back in it, right? We have so many different options. We can do multi-dimensional coverage. And that's really what MoroccanOil has, and I'll touch on that in a minute. But I think it's important because when you think of all the other color services we do, none of them are one size fits all, right? Everything else we do is completely customized from the consultation to deliver to the guest based on their desires, their wants, and their limitations, right? So for me, I think it's really, really important to say, what is it that you're trying to achieve? And let's talk about what you actually need to create great coverage if that's what you're looking for. So when we talk about analysis, of course, we're going to use our little level finder, which is somewhere around here. I all saw it earlier, so oh, here it is, right? We use our little level finder. I see a lot of this sometimes, like black, right? No. Take the hair up, right? Take it, wiggle that hair inside of it so that you can see that reflection and decide exactly which level that is. It's a much better way of going about it. This level finder is important because there's another myth I would love to dispel and work with y'all on. We all learn or teach a level system, correct? We all teach undertone. But a lot of times my students that come out of school come out and they use the same level or undertone system for every single color brand they use. And then they get disappointed, right? Because the truth of the matter is there a universal level system? No. Is there a universal underlying pigment system? No, right? So what you have to do when you're utilizing a different brand, say than what you're using currently in school, think about your students when they leave, they're gonna play with other brands. It's important for them to find this information, right? Because our levels are different from Schwarzkopf, are different from Pravana, are different from Paul Mitchell, are different from Goldwell, are different from Kuhn. There might be some similarities, but I say it's like driving a car, right? Once you learn the theory or understand this piece of the theory, then you just need this information from the brand that you're using to make that work. What happens is we end up memorizing things, right? For me, I memorized my old level system, and then when I moved to Moroccan, guess what? It's a little different. I actually like it better because it's more nuanced to what's actually happening as we lift through the hair. But this is super, super important because a lot of times if I'm coming from a brand where level 8 is yellow orange, my previous brand, MoroccanOil level 8 is yellow. So all of a sudden, the stylist is freaking out. Oh my God, you're telling me to use a 7? Well, it's a 7 in our brand. It's an 8 in your other brand, right? So I think this is important to make sure that they understand the underlying pigments and how we lift through them. But I think it's also important to understand that that's going to vary, just like it does with paint brands. You know, I could take a Behr paint and take it to Sherman-Williams, and it's going to look similar, not exactly the same. Does that make sense? So changing color lines for me is like renting a car. When you rent a car, you have to move the seats and adjust the mirrors and set the steering wheel and get your navigation going. You do all that before you drive out of that garage. The one thing you didn't forget how to do when you got behind the wheel of a car is drive. They're already doing this stuff, right? They're already understanding this. They just might need to adjust the mirrors and move the seats. Does that make sense? Anybody have any questions about that? Because that comes up literally every class I have. Is this understanding? Well, I'm not going to, and think about that. How many of y'all use a number system? Like use a 9.9 or an 8.2 or whatever, right? You start talking numbers, especially on, like when I think of on top of blondes, you start talk about putting a 6 on top of a blonde and some of us start to sweat. But remember, our 6 is like everybody else's 7 because our undertones are a little bit different. So again, that's where you kind of have to let go of that. Like I've learned this universal level system, right? Or I'm so comfortable with the brand that I'm with that they don't ever want to change. And it's not that I want everybody to use MoroccanOil, but I want everybody to have the control. As a colorist, that's my number one thing, is I want control. And so by mastering this part of our brand, or whatever brand that they use, they will have that ultimate control. And then when they want to change brands, they just need to find this piece of information. By the way, not every brand discloses it. And sometimes it's a little hard to define. Any questions on that? So the last thing I want to touch on is this idea of hair texture. The rest of this we're pretty comfortable with. But when we talk about gray coverage, when we talk about lightener, we talk about deposit, we talk about lift with color, texture is what dictates two things to me, especially when I'm formulating color. The amount of energy that we need, right? And the level of saturation, right? Because those two things are both important. They work together. And so gray coverage is important. Why is it, does anybody use anything less than 20 volume in here on gray? Yes, raise your hand if you do. Less than 20 volume. Okay, cool. Now I know us manufacturers, we always like to recommend 20 volume. But what really dictates the amount of energy for me is how fine, medium, or coarse the hair is. Because if I've got fine hair, I have less cuticle to work through. If I have coarse hair, I have more cuticle to work through, right? That's like, for example, when we talk about lifting with color, right? If I want to go 3 levels of lift, which is the max in MoroccanOil, I need to use 40. 40 is going to guarantee me 3 lifts of color. On a fine hair guest, I might get it with 30, but to guarantee it, I use 40. The same when we're approaching gray coverage. What are things that people complain about when it comes to gray coverage? What are some things people complain about? Resistance, right? That could be one. And that could come down to just sheerly processing time and the correct saturation, usually. Okay, a lot of times we get some heat, right? So maybe that end that we really like to look at got a little bit warmer. Depth of color and amount of pigment, right? The higher up in volume we go, the more lift we have to do to get to deposit. Typically that deposit is a little bit softer, right? So again, what I like to look at is what is the diameter of the hair shaft and what's the most appropriate energy to get the job done, right? A lot of times I utilize the 15 volume of MoroccanOil because it's that nice in between. By the way, now that you know the lighteners or the developers are logarithmic, you can't just make a 15 by mixing 10 and 20 equal parts because it's logarithmic, right? I love that because a lot of times our students don't understand that either, right? And I love being able to explain that. They're like, oh, that's why I lifted so much. Like, yeah, you made it like a 19 volume. Okay. So that's really, really important, right? The 10, 15, or 20 volume based off of fine, medium, and coarse hair. And then the other thing is saturation, right? And again, you can see where it's because our undertones are lighter, there might be a tendency for some of us to maybe underformulate, right? We put an 8 on, we probably should be using a 7. I don't like to always think about levels as how light or dark something is. And that's how we teach it. But levels are also tell you how much saturation is in that tube of color. And again, how many times have you been on a course guest? You look at their hair, you look at the 7-in swatch, you're like, hey, this looks great, right? You put that 7-in on and it looks like an 8, right? Use the example of us. How many are in here? Probably about 65 of us, something like that. This room looks pretty full, right? So imagine this is like a fine hair quartet. Now, if I knock that wall down behind us and double or triple the room size, but I don't add any more of you, it's going to look a whole lot more empty, right? Because now we can spread out. So that's the idea too when you're thinking about saturation, right? How much pigment do I need to control that undertone? And again, if you're at that wrong saturation level, you're going to have that effect where there's your old paint color coming through, right? So super, super important to keep those two things in mind. And I find that hair texture is really what dictates that. Hair texture is what's going to tell me how much saturation of dye I need and how much energy I need to get the job done. Make sense? We do this with reds all the time. You ever use like a 7R, you lift them with 20 volume, you put 7R, you're hoping for that beautiful bright red color, and it comes out red orange. And you're like, man, that's not exactly what I was going for, right? So it is possible that that 7R just didn't have enough saturation to cover that underlying pigment. So moving to a 6 is going to do that. You all teach that with gray coverage, like sometimes on that coarser texture to drop a level, right? Super important, especially in those light levels, right? So I think that's really, really important in consultation to really take care of that hair history, find out what the analysis of the actual diameter of that hair shaft is, right? And then be able to go in and formulate my level and my developer based on that. Any questions? Anything anybody wants to share? Feedback? Anything? Okay, well, thank you. Perfect. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about hair color principles. So if you have a notebook, this would be a great time to get it out. We're going to do this color algebra, but so this is the other part that I find I spend a lot of time working through with professionals, right? And what I love about MoroccanOil's system is it's super duper simple, okay? We formulate off of undertone, right? So we formulate our color brand off of undertone. Your color choices are based off of your undertone, right? Pretty similar to most other color brands. And we utilize color theory to make that happen. So I'm going to break down the color theory, which most of us know, right? So we know what this is. We know what primary, secondary, and tertiary colors are, correct? Perfect, love it. We know what complementary colors are, right? Okay, let me ask you a question. Why does why does violet neutralize yellow? Why does violet neutralize yellow? Aha, I love it. First answer out of the bag. Do you know what I usually get from stylists when I say this? Because it's across the color now. Are they wrong?
No, they're correct.
What are they actually telling you? They're telling you the how. This is how you get rid of yellow as you add violet. The why is because you're introducing the missing primaries. So if I have yellow, my two missing primaries are blue and red, which make violet. That's why violet neutralizes. I think that's so important to drive home, right? Because a lot of students know the how, but they don't understand the why. So when it doesn't work, what's the first question that they ask? Why didn't this work? Right? So I think that's super, super important, especially when we get into start formulating and we're looking at undertones. It's important to see that, right? So I think that's a huge differentiation. And almost 90% of my classes, they always say cross the color map, which is great. They figured out how to operate it, but they don't necessarily have that full control yet. So what I love about color algebra is it helps with that. So let's take a look at our shading system, just so that you all can familiarize yourself with what MoroccanOil has. And then you're going to see how easy it is to teach this color brand. So again, when we talk about depth, we talk about how light or dark. I also like the idea of saturation, right? When you talk about tone, tone is the color you see. The question I get all the time, what is the base of your color? Is it blue base? Is it brown base? Is it gold? Is it green? Right? For us, the bases of our color depend on the tonal family that you grab. So we have 9 different tonal families. And underneath each one of these categories, there can be secondary colors. So for example, we have a 0.1 or a B series, which has that blue primary, but we also have a blue violet. We also have a blue gold. We also have a blue green, right? So we have those different categories living underneath that. What that tells you is the primary tone is blue and the secondary tone is the secondary tone. Now, everybody always asks, well, what percentage of it is this and what percentage of it is that? The truth of the matter is every single color has a different calibration because you're working with different undertones. Some brands will come out there and say, well, this has 30% gold and this has 70% blue, right? But as that rotates through the levels, it's gonna change. So that's more of like a ballpark. It doesn't really give you the exact thing. Cool thing about MoroccanOil is you can customize it to make it where you can put in 30% blue and 70% gold if that's what you want, right? So I love the control. These are the tonal names and numbers. We call it both just to make it simple. If you speak numbers, great. You speak letters, great. You want to speak both of them? Good luck. And here is our underlying pigment chart. And again, what I love about this is because we're a newer brand, I find that this is way more realistic than what most undertone maps will teach you. Most undertone maps start at blue at level 1 or level 2. By the way, you notice we're 2 through 10. There's no visible difference. We're an Italian manufactured color, so we don't see a difference between 1 and 2, right? But when you look at it, look what's at level 2, the undertone. It's red. What happens when you put light around a level 2? It doesn't turn blue. It turns red, okay? Then as you raise through those undertones, what I love is that this is more actually what you see. A lot of times undertone maps go from red to red-orange to orange to yellow-orange to yellow. Well, that's not how it works, right? Because you don't go from red to red-orange to orange. You go from red to red-orange to orange-red and then to orange. And then before you go to yellow-orange, you got to go to orange-yellow. So I found myself in a lot of brands mixing 5s and 6s together and 7s and 8s together to try and make this balance. And what I love about this is, look, we start here at level 2, red, then into red-orange, then into orange-red, then into orange, orange-yellow, yellow-orange, and then look, this is my favorite thing because you know I love to blonde some hair. And I love having 3 different intensities of yellow to deal with, starting at level 8, being the most intense control of yellow, into level 10, which is the least intense control of yellow. You've got the 9 living in between, and you have clear. So I can really, really play with my colors up in those blonde ranges to really customize my tone. But I love this. And again, just to point out, for anybody that works with American brand, most of the time, only 9 and 10 is yellow, and 8 is yellow-orange. And you can see where that shifted. So maybe in MoroccanOil, you might be using a 7. You see why we look at undertone and how important this is. Any questions on that so far? Feeling pretty good? All right, here comes the fun part. So we also have our color shading system. Now, what I love about this, if anybody's seen the color, I think what it's called now, the little cones, right? The color theory cone. We've got one cone going up. We've got one cone going down, right? So if I were to slice that cone in the middle, if you look up the cone, as we go up, the colors will get more white introduced into them. So they become more pastel. As you move down into the cone, the colors add more brown and black. right? So you get you subdue the vibrancy. This is a slice of that cone looking straight down, right? And the colors that live around the outside are going to be colors that are tone dominant. There's little to no visible brown in those colors. What is that great for? Well, it's great for tone on tone. I've got yellow. What do I want to get rid of that yellow with? Violet. So I'm going to grab a V. I know by grabbing my V, there's no yellow, there's no red, there's no brown, there's no nothing in that. So I'm getting that true tone on tone situation. I'll use a deposit example, right? Let's say somebody has brown hair, level 5. They want to have a red-brown flavor to their hair. Well, I've got Calypso, I've got my R series at 0.6. So I can take my 0.6 pure red, put it on top of my level 5 hair, and now I have a red-brown. Because hair color is an equation. It's always what you have plus what you add equals what you get, right? So does that help to kind of understand the outside? Then as we move through, imagine traveling down that cone, what happens? We start to add more brown into the background. So the colors that live here, 7.7.1, 7.3, these guys here, those are going to have some tone dominance. They're also going to have some blend in them, right? One of my favorite colors is ash gold. And what I love about the ash gold series is that it's perfect for that situation we talked about earlier, where you've got 7, 8, 9, 10 all living in the same campus. The overall reflex coming back from that color is too brassy. So in my color theory mind, I'm like, well, I'm going to grab a blue to neutralize it. Well, I can't really grab a 10A because the 10A is going to ice out those lightest pieces and actually like exacerbate the warmth, because now I'm going to have this juxtaposition of really cool blonde sitting next to really warm level 7. And I can't use a 7 blue. I will get rid of all the warmth, but what happen to all my dimension? Bye-bye, right? So what I love about ash gold, and you can see the difference between the two, by the way. So this is going to be kind of hard because there's all these blue lights behind me. But here's my ash on my B series. Here's my ash gold. When you put them side by side, now you can see that little bit of blend in the background. What I love about this situation, if I had that guess that was too brassy, I grab 913 with a little bit of clear, and it blends all of that tonality out of there. So I still have the brightness, I still have the lightness and reflection, but I've put this ash gold blend in there at a level 9 to kind of soften and blend out that reflection of one, right? You think about an ash gold, it almost sounds like a green, right? It's blue with gold, right? That's another reason why this has some background in it, because what does blue and green, what blue and green tend to do? It tends to muddy blonde. So again, that's the purpose of this being in the background. Then as you move to the middle, you'll see our 0.9, our 0.99, and our 0.91, along with our 0 and 00. Those are going to be our N and NN series and our chocolates. And so I'm just going to grab these guys. What I love about MoroccanOil's tonality of the N series is it's a cool yellow. Someone tell me what a cool yellow is. What's a cool yellow? How would you describe a cool yellow? How would you describe a warm yellow? What does yellow have in it to make it warm? Aha. Right? So if we look at yellow, right? Orange and red are on this side. What's on the other side? Yes. So it's yellow with what we call a cool yellow with a little bit of a green reflection. What that does is it creates a little bit of softness. It leaves the natural reflection that natural hair has without the additional warmth, right? And it's kind of hard to see when you look right on this, because in an N series, that should never be the tonal feature. It should always be a reflex, right? I should see natural or neutral first and then the reflection. So when you turn this on its side, you can really see it. Our chocolate series, look at this, right? Beautiful. Who's used the chocolates in here? Anybody? If you want to try something MoroccanOil, grab the chocolate series. They are stunning. What I love about them is when you look at these, you see chocolate, don't you? Right? But if I turn, you can see this reflection of iridescent rose and coppery caramel. When I put these two together, you can really see those tonal values playing out. Right? So now can you see that little bit of that cool yellowing effect? Right? Versus you can see almost that iridescent rose in these. But again, they're not like a feature. Do you have a question? Oh, sorry, I saw your hand up. So I love that because it tells you what the background is, right? They can understand what the purpose of that background is to control a little bit of warmth, give a natural reflection. These always come out chocolatey. They're never rosy, they're never red brown, they're never orange brown, they're never plum brown, right? They're chocolate first with that reflection of the secondary. So that's our tonal map, right? You can also see we have a 0.8 series. This also drives a lot of questions in my class, right? We have this 0.8 series. And you see where it is. Why is it in the middle? Why does it live in that black part of the map? Hey, you're actually pretty close. So what she said is kind of helping to neutralize these other pigments over here. And you're right. Think about gray as being the coolest neutral possible. The coolest, because gray is a neutral, wouldn't you agree? Gray is a neutral. This is just the coolest neutral possible. You know what these are awesome for? Lifting natural hair. These are awesome for lifting natural hair. Like the tonal value that you get from lifting with 6, 8, 9, and 10 gray. Beautiful, like beautiful, beautiful, controlled warmth, right? So you have a cool aspect to it, but it has that reflective shimmer of natural warmth in it. So it's a really, really beautiful color. Some people call it kind of mushroomy, some people call it rich, but really, really great if you ever lift with color. These are awesome to lift with, and that's why they live in the middle. Because gray is a neutral, it's just the coolest version, and you can see that, right? It's mainly blue and violet. There's very little yellow in here. Okay, any questions about our tonal series map? I just wanted to point that out. So now you can kind of see, like, I literally can customize whatever it is that I want. You know, a lot of times people, I'll use this as the last example, then we'll do our color algebra. A lot of times people will look at this. This is our red violets, and they'll go, well, your red violets they're not very vibrant. Well, where does this 0.5 live on the map? Right, you see why this is important to identify. It lives right next to the middle, which means it's got a lot of brown background in it, right? But if I wanted to create a pure tone red violet with MoroccanOil, can I do it? Absolutely. What's option 1? Y'all don't know the number system yet, so you can use letters. What could I do? I heard 1, 0.6, and what else? 0.2. 0.2 is violet, 0.6 is red. Now, as a colorist, I can control not only how much red or how much violet I want, but how saturated is the red and how saturated is the violet. Second option, option number 2, we have this cool oxidative color infusion, right? These are actually 100% oxidative. They're not direct dyes. So I can literally mix them with equal parts of developer and get a true deposit of this tone. In this situation, I can only control how much red or how much violet, but this is the purest tone. Option 3 would be to take my 0.6 and my 0.2 and layer in my infusion with that. So I just took this idea of, well, maybe our red violet in this series isn't meant to be vibrant, but I just gave you 36 options to make a vibrant red violet, right? So again, for me, that's what gives me the control in this brand, is the fact that I can build my formulas. So it's important that people enjoy the factor of formulating, right? And that's why I always love going back to that undertone, which leads me to color algebra. So again, just a little recap, tone dominant, right? The shades that are around the outside, those are the ones that are going to have little to no visible brown that are great for doing those tone on tone results. You have tone dominant blending. These are the ones that'll have tone dominance, but they'll also have that blended or pre-blend in the background, the brown or neutral. Not a full on neutral, but some in there. BG, RB, our green series are great examples of that. Oh God, I did it again. I pushed the wrong button and then it freezes. And our brown base shades, right? Our NN, our chocolates, right? Those are going to be your true neutrals. But let's talk about color algebra, right? This is really my favorite part of this class. So it's a simple equation. Hair color is what you have, plus what you add equals what you get. I say it over and over, right? It's not only the color of the crayon you're coloring with, it's also the color of the paper that you're coloring on. Those two things combine to give you a result. So you can look at it one of two ways. I do it this way too, have over add. You can put add over have, it doesn't really matter. All of that's going to come together to make your result. So you said it so beautifully earlier. How do I make neutral? I have to have all three of my primaries present. Now, this is more theory as opposed to actual formulation, right? Because I can have any kind of, like I can have 3 parts red, 1 part yellow, and 2 parts blue, and it's a neutral. I can have 1 part blue, 1 part red, 1 part yellow, it's a neutral, right? It all depends on what kind of shade of neutral you're trying to make. So don't worry about that. I just want you to think about making neutral because this is more color theory applied. But when you have all 3 primaries present, you can cross them out. So I have red, yellow, and blue, right? So let's do a couple of these. Again, what you have over what you add equals the result. So we'll start with the one we're most familiar with. We've been talking about it all morning. I'm going to move her out of the way. So we have y over v. It looks like that. So write that down. What we're going to do is break everything down into its primaries so you can see this action happen. This is a great way to know, like, what happens when you put red, violet on top of blue, green? What happens when you put yellow, orange on top of blue, right? It's a great way for them to kind of predict what kind of tonal value they're going to see. So can we break down yellow? Can you break down yellow? No, it's a primary color. It's like a primary number. We can't divide it down any further. So we write y equals y. Now on the bottom, we have violet, which is the secondary color. Can we break that down? Absolutely. What 2 parts make up violet? Red and blue, or blue and red. So again, when you have all 3 primaries on this side of the equation, you get to cancel them out. So I've got yellow, I've got blue, and I've got red. So what kind of result do I get? A neutral result. Okay, a neutral result. Let's look at another one. Orange and blue. Break down the top for me. Red and yellow. Yellow and red. What's on the bottom? Can I break down that bottom part of the equation? No, because blue is that primary tone, right? So we get blue on the bottom. And again, look what you have. Yellow, red, and blue. So again, my result is neutral. Here's red and green. I like to do all 3 just so that they can see it play out. Right? So if we have red, can we break that down? Perfect. So we should have something that looks like that on the top. What do we have on the bottom? Yellow and blue, right? So again, look what I have. Red, yellow, and blue. They all cancel each other out, and I get a neutral flavor. Everybody following along so far? You liking it so far? Now we're going to take it up a level, right? Let's talk about tertiary colors, right? Now this is where sometimes people that are like not math people start to freak out. You say algebra and they freak out. But here's what I'll tell you. You know what I always loved about algebra? I love that in algebra, you could have all the math right, but if one number was wrong, right? Your arithmetic was right, but this number was off, so your answer is wrong, right? So I always love that, right? Because it's like I did all the right work, I just put the wrong number. So this sometimes will scare people. I think this is very simple. So let's break down red and orange. First of all, let's split it in half. Can you break down red? No. Can you break down orange? So what 3 letters should I have on the top there? R. If you got RRY, you're doing good. Okay. Now let's look at the bottom. Blue, green. Let's split that into its parts. Can you break down blue? Can you break down green? What do you have on the bottom? Blue, blue, and yellow. So again, when I have all 3 primaries present, I get to cancel them out. So look, I have red, blue, and yellow. Red, blue, and yellow. So what do I get? A neutral. By the way, if you have a tertiary color, if you wanted to completely neutralize it, what do you have to use? Another tertiary color. Otherwise, your parts don't mix up, or they don't match up, right? Did you all follow me on that? Y'all understand that? Your parts don't match up. You have to have the same amount of parts. Let's do yellow-orange. This is a popular color because yellow-orange is that color that most all of us don't really care for, right? This is that color that leaves that brassiness behind. So if we break down yellow, orange, and blue, violet, tell me what y'all get on the top. What do y'all have on the top line there? Yellow, yellow, and red. Perfect. And then for blue, violet, what'd you get on the bottom? Right. Blue, blue, and red. So again, here it plays out. Red, blue, and yellow. Red, blue, and yellow. So this flavor of level 7 for us would be more of what we would call more of a true neutralized flavor. Because I'm putting the exact same underlying pigment that's complementary and creating that neutral. Let's talk about this situation. Because people hear the word brass and they start envisioning purple for some reason. Would you all agree? People think brass, they're like, oh, let's get a violet shampoo. When I think of brass, though, I don't think of yellow. I think of yellow and orange, right? And we've all probably made the mistake of grabbing a violet toner to put on top of yellow orange because that's what happens, right? It's mainly yellow, no big deal, right? But again, I think this is so important. I mean, think about how many times maybe our student might send a guest home with purple shampoo and maybe that's not the correct coloring that they need. And all of a sudden the guests come back and what are they saying? My hair color is warmer, right? So I love this because you can see it play out. On the top, you've got yellow, yellow, and red. On the bottom, you've got red and blue. So what am I going to get? Well, first of all, I have red, blue, and yellow, right? Which gives me one part. I get some neutralization, don't I? But look what's left over. So what I'm going to have is a neutral flavor with an orange reflex. Okay, so I've made some neutral move towards neutral, but again, I'm leaving that orange behind, so the reflection is going to be orange. That may or may not be what the guest wants. I know it's not what I want. So, and this is where I really like to show that, like, this makes you feel like you're out of control, right? Like, oh no, I made the mistake here. But you know, sometimes to me, it's about creating the flavor of neutral that's appropriate for the guest. Take it back to this idea of those flip charts with the colors, right? What tonality of neutral fits the guest best? Well, each neutral has a different personality. Yellow is brighter and lighter. Blue is deeper and darker. Red is richer and more intense. So where in that neutral flavor do you want it to have? Well, if I have yellow orange and I used blue violet as my tonal value last time, and it was too subdued, I wanted a brighter neutral result. As a colorist, there's a way I can change my formula on top of that yellow orange to achieve that. How would I do it? How would I tone yellow orange so that I got a more yellow or more reflective neutral? Say it. Use blue only. Right? How many of y'all came up with that? Right? Why would I use blue only? Because look what happens here. I've got yellow, yellow, and red, and I have blue. So again, you have red, blue, and yellow. Look what's left over. So my BV result will be a little bit more neutralized. My B result will be a little bit brighter. So do you see how right in that, I love this example of using yellow-orange because you show how they make the mistake with it. And then you come back and you show them how to control. And that to me is what's important. I'm not just guessing when I'm throwing tones on the head. I know exactly what my undertone is. And then I can build my formula based on where I want that to land. So in this little color map here, I always like to think of it this way. I'm sorry. I always like to think of it this way, right? Where in this bullseye do you want your dart to land? Do you want it more on the red side, on the yellow side, on the blue side? Where in this dartboard do you want that neutral flavor to land? So again, it gives the stylist this opportunity to say, oh, wait, I do have control. I can control what my formulas look like, right? So I just love this. How many of y'all have done something like this before? How many of y'all want to take this back to your school? Super fun, right? And I think it's a great way. You can build worksheets out. You can take other tonal values and write them down and have them break them out. You can do situations where you're like, hey, take two colors and put them together and see what you get, right? I think sometimes we as colorists think that way. So I love that you can apply the theory to formulation by just doing a worksheet. And I love doing this in my classes because again, it really gives them the idea that, hey, I have the control, right? I have the ability to make my formulas the way I want them. Any questions? Any questions? I will send over my worksheets to her, to Brenda. And I guess y'all can email them out. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Okay, last but not least, I want to leave you with resources because I think this is the most important part. When it comes down to it, people are always looking to see how people are using color, how are they formulating, befores and afters, all those different things. So a couple pages that I want you to pay attention to are Facebook MoroccanOil Professional Hair Color Group page. So look up that in group, make sure you type in MoroccanOil Professional Hair Color. Otherwise, you'll get the styling page. That has over 3,000 members. We're always chit chatting in there. You can hear a lot of feedback from stylists and what they think about MoroccanOil and see some cool formulas. My Instagram and MoroccanOil Pro, you can follow me at Todd_MO Pro 21. And you can also follow our professional channel, which is MoroccanOil Pro on Instagram. Yeah. Oh, yeah, there's lots of that, right? So the question was like, can people get on and ask formulation questions or, come in with questions? Absolutely. That's exactly what I love about this group is it's very community-based, so I feel like you get a lot of that. And then on MoroccanOil Pro, we have a lot of influencers, we have educators, myself, color pros, we're always posting. So make sure you follow those. And then here, finally, this is that color destination app. I wanted to leave this with you as the final resource because it's such an amazing tool. I would definitely encourage your students to download it and start playing around with the app because it's so, so powerful. You've got Google Play on this side over here. So you're Android, if you're an app person or Apple person, you can scan that QR code. If they don't work, just go to your app store and type in MoroccanOil or Color Destination, and they should pull up. You will have to make a user profile and a password. But what's great about this is it's got all that functionality with hair tutorials. It's got courses. It has introductory work. It has a stylist corner where people can post their work. It has an Ask the Expert button where you can go in and type a question when it comes to someone like me. So it's a very, very user-friendly app, and I definitely encourage you to play around with it when you get a chance. So today, we did a lot of stuff. We went through a little bit of an application. We talked about our technology. We went through consultation. We went through our color systems. We talked about our lighteners, and we did some color algebra. It's a lot of work in an hour and a half, right? How many of y'all feel like your brain is full? Yes, very good. Any other questions or feedback that you all have? I would love to hear it. Anything else that you all have?
You're great.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, if there's no other questions, thank you all so much for the invitation. I've really, really enjoyed my time with you. And again, I'm so honored to be in front of a group of educators who gets to do what you all do every day. I will tell you, it is one of my plans in the future is to possibly be a cosmetology educator because I think what y'all do is so special. And I really, really am humbled and honored by what y'all do in the field every day. So thank you for your commitment to the students and enjoy the rest of your day. And I think you'll have a little breaky break.
Yeah, 15-minute break.
So a little 15 minutes.
15-minute break, yeah. She's like, okay, I'm gonna be there on time. Just help me. We take her. We don't want that. No kidding. Like, oh, that, March. You're pushing too hard. I'm South Texas. Thank you. I'm gonna walk all the way around. Back. So they have to. Trying to do my program in a few things for them. I guess we're saying. So he's not. My first ever to teach, first ever to teach high school. She's in the child. You have the only one. Yes. Oh. Yeah, you haven't heard over years, right? What did you agree? All the person. Well, you have to be. Yeah. There are some resources that you have. I didn't get up there. Oh gosh, she lost the back of her. Where did you leave this? In your. Oh, yeah. Your cup of your paint. Make sure you would do. Yeah, regularly. We're getting your underwear? No. But your head? And I'm like, that's so weird. Because we did very they have bags. I'm doing what I heard. But I looked into it.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's what. You're cracking me up. Just. You gotta see that. Yeah. Like, you know. So, okay, so I'm like, there's not any.
Yeah.
Do you think maybe it dropped out like?
No, I literally said. But let me tell you, she blocks it at least once a day. I didn't know I lost it yesterday. I saw one over there, so I saw her name. I should have gone. I'm feeling good somehow. Well, yeah, I should go this way. Or for me.
So you have any clean bras or something? Oh. It's like you dropped one of my little beds. Well, this is something to think.
I'm gonna use it. Maybe I'll need to buy it. And that might change how I. That's like.
Well, they don't want to pay more than 2 weeks, right? Right, so I have to take everything for you. I'll want to. We get fit for here and maybe I'm sure. Makes it. Yeah, it's just. They do 250 a year and then. The second year, I give them. And the school doesn't have. So I know. That's fine. They work my time. They're smaller.
Yeah. It's all.
I just need to. I'll stay out here for a light person.
This still.
But you get that static. That's.
They're like. That was shots.